my 25 male family cut contact with me 5 years ago after a fight with my younger brother. Now they want me to come back, but I'm having doubts about it. Original post. My family pretty much cut all ties with me at the end of 2015. Things have been a bit turbulent for a while, but when I went over to my parents' house for Christmas in 2015, I got very drunk one night and got into an argument with my younger brother, which ended up turning physical. I was 19 at the time, he would have been 15, and he came out of it pretty badly. Without going into massive detail, he had said something that struck a nerve. I won't say what because it's quite personal and not really relevant here, and I ended up injuring him quite badly. There was a question of potentially involving the police, but nothing ever happened in regards to that. In the end, they all just told me they wanted nothing to do with me anymore, which is fair enough. I was completely in the wrong, and they were absolutely right to want to cut me off. I'm not complaining about that in the slightest. I had already moved out by that stage, so it wasn't a case of kicking me out. It was more just telling me to never come back again. And again, I can't blame them for this at all, and would be surprised if you could either. This post isn't about me complaining about being cut off or pretending that I didn't deserve it, because I did. And I'm not trying to play the victim here. I genuinely regret what I did and have spent time trying to self-improve in the wake of it. It was quite difficult for me to come to terms with this for the first year or so afterwards. The only person in my family that I had any contact with was my mom. We never really spoke in depth. Just small updates, wishing each other happy birthdays and things like that. Honestly though, after that first year, things have gotten so much better for me. I stopped drinking, which was the root of a lot of my problems. I got my head down and ended up doing very well at the uni. I've now got a job that I love, and I've been with my girlfriend for the best part of 4 years, and things are absolutely great. To be brutally honest, I don't miss any of my family. My relationship with them hadn't been great for a while before the fight, and as far as I was concerned, I didn't miss them and they didn't miss me. And being in a non-contact basis with all of them, apart from the occasional contact with my mom, was for the better. However, over the last few months, my mom began messaging me more frequently and asking more personal questions about my life, my work, my relationship, etc. I thought it was just boredom on her part, but she maintained it for a while and began to introduce the idea of me coming back to visit her at some point, which I always shrugged. She started to persist with it, and then yesterday it all came to a head when she added me to a WhatsApp group chat with the rest of the family. I was then told how they had all come to a family decision that 5 years ago was enough, and that my brother had found it in his heart to forgive me for what had happened, and that they wanted me to come over at some point to catch up on lost time. These are all quotes from what they sent me. I didn't say very much. I just wanted time to think. I'm quite torn on this now. Part of me feels like I'm obliged to go along with it. They cut contact with me because of my own actions, and if my brother's forgiven me and wants to reestablish contact with me, then it's my duty to do so. On the other hand, I feel like since contact was cut, my life improved a lot. My relationship with them had been on a downward slope for a fair bit of time beforehand, and I just haven't found myself missing any of it. That's why I'm asking for advice. Would you say that I'm obliged to go and reestablish contact because it was my fault that contact was cut, or do you think it would be acceptable for me to not do so? Now for the top of comments before reading the update. Personally, I feel like it would be worth at least a few meetups to see how things go. You're a different person now than you were then, and they're likely different people now too. You know you don't need them in your life, but you may find that being around them enhances your life in some way, or you may find that being around them brings only negative feelings. Just because you give it a try doesn't mean that you have to keep them in your life if you don't want to. LMO, if you don't, you'll always have a nagging what if feeling. That's been one of my main thoughts. I don't want to regret not doing it in 5 to 10 years just because I don't want to know. I've enjoyed having conversations with my mom, but I've never really seen eye to eye with the others. It's just a difficult one. Before the fight, in what ways was your relationship with your family rocky? Not that you have to go into detail or anything, of course. I ask because it sounds like some of their actions and behaviors leading up to the fight weren't of the best nature either. Have they accepted responsibility for their roles in what had happened and apologized? Or from their perspective, is this all 100% on you and you're the villain that they are graciously providing another chance to? Also, kudos for pulling yourself out of a bad situation. I know that that's extremely difficult to do. They were always quite overbearing when I was younger. You could say overprotective or repressive depending on how you looked at it. By the time I was about 15 or 16, they couldn't really stop me from doing things anymore, and I started doing things that went against their values, which caused friction, especially between me and my father. So, for example, they were strong believers in no sex before marriage. Then I got caught with a girl when I was 16, and he barely spoke to me for about a month. They do probably see it as gracious, another chance. That's the impression I got off them at least. You're not obligated to reestablish contact with them, but also consider the fact that the last time that you had anything to do with them, you were still a child. Teen years are always rocky, obviously more for you than most. But you're not a kid anymore. That doesn't mean that you need to rebuild relationships, just that any relationships you do build will be completely different. You also have the option of pulling back at any point. You could try meeting up and seeing how it goes. You could maybe only see them a few times a year. It's not an all or nothing situation. You can work out how involved you'd like to be with them, which includes maintaining the status quo. Now for the update. I wasn't initially planning on doing an update for that post, but the amount of responses I got from it were absolutely unprecedented, so I decided it was the right thing for me to do one. I didn't respond to every single comment, but I did read through all of them. I greatly appreciate everyone's input, whether it was positive or negative, or telling me to go back or cut contact completely. It was really good to get different takes on the situation because at the time, it was a lot to take in, and still is in a way. I'll start off by saying that soon after the post was written, I phoned my brother. We talked for a few minutes about how things were going, and then I apologized to him for what had happened back in 2015. He didn't specifically say he forgave me, but he was amicable and said that he appreciated me doing it. I'm glad I did. I know 5.5 years is a long time to go without doing it, but that was the first vocal conversation that I'd had with him since the family cut contact. He told me that the whole incident hadn't left him with any mental or physical damage. And while I have no way of knowing whether that's completely true, I was glad to hear it. I don't want to make it about myself, but it did also feel like a bit of a weight lifted off of my shoulders. In terms of the actual resumption of contact, it won't be happening for now. After a few days of talking to the family as a collective in the group chat, which I have now left, as well as some individual conversations with different members, I told them that I was happy to increase contact with them through messaging, but that as things stand, I didn't think resuming face-to-face contact would be right and that I wasn't going to do it. As I stated in the initial post, I was already having severe doubts about it, and the conversations I had with them pretty much made my mind up for me. I'll list a few examples of it here. 1. Much of the discussion I had with my family was done through a group chat in which I, 25 male, was added to my mom, 45 female. This group chat also contained my dad, 54 male, and my two brothers, 20 male and 14 male. The group chat was titled Reunion, so it was pretty obvious what their intentions were. 2. The initial language used by them when I was added bothered me. I gave some examples of it in the original post, things like my mom saying my brother had found it in his heart to forgive me, and them coming to a family decision that 5 years was enough. It made it seem like there was no chance of it being a normal family relationship at all, and that I would always be indebted and subservient to them in some form or another. As I said, I had no issue with being cut off and felt they were pretty justified in doing so, but that doesn't mean that I would be prepared to come back and be in a constant state of owing one, and likely being made to feel pressured to do things for them because they were so kind to find it in their hearts to let me back in. 3. This sort of language continued throughout me being in the group chat. Some more examples were being told that I had lots of work to do if we wanted a normal relationship. Notice that they didn't say we, and was also compared to the prodigal son multiple times by my very religious parents, which just made me think they were doing it for their own spiritual reasons rather than actually being interested in having me back as part of the family. The final nail in the coffin was that when I was specifically expressed doubts about it, my dad said, "After all you did to us as a family, we've decided to let you back in," and then pretty much went on to tell me that I should be biting their hands off for the chance to make amends, and that I was ungrateful for not doing so. I told them I was backing out of it pretty soon after that. A few of the replies to my original post asked if any of them needed an organ. I initially brushed this off as a joke, but after some of the conversations, I had genuinely think that it's a possibility that could be true. 4. My girlfriend, 24 female, is also a big reason why I was initially having doubts, and a couple of things that were said to my dad completely reinforced these. I 100% know that he would dislike her. Not through any fault of her own, but mainly because he has some old-fashioned views on women, and he's also quite racist. She is only half white, and when I was younger, my dad made it pretty clear that he didn't want me to date outside of my race. In the group chat, he described her as my exotic girlfriend, and made a couple of very stereotypical assumptions on her based on her race, which made it pretty clear to me that he still found it wrong and abnormal of me to be with a girl who isn't completely white. If I resumed a somewhat normal father-son relationship with him, I'm almost certain that he'd try to interfere in some way and would be at the very least encourage me to end things with her. It's not like I've only been seeing her for a month either. We've been together for almost 4 years and have discussed marriage, so she absolutely takes priority over the family. Those are the main reasons behind me not choosing to go down the route of face-to-face contact with my family. There are a few other things too, such as the fact that they seemed awfully interested in grandchildren who didn't even exist, and also that I suspected that it was all my mom's doing and that the rest of the family weren't that interested. I am fairly sure she was feeding the other lines. My 14-year-old brother was typing an awful lot like my 45-year-old mom, let's put it that way. With all these factors combined with my initial doubts about it, made my mind up that I wasn't going to resume face-to-face contact. I messaged them telling them that while I do appreciate them trying to get me to do so, I just had too many doubts about it going forward and starting a meeting with them face-to-face or going to their house. I did say that they all had my number now and were free to text me at any point if they wanted to talk, and then left the group chat. I know that they've all read it because they've all been online since I sent it, but I haven't had a single message from any of them. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure if I ever will, and yet I can't really say I feel that sad about it. I'm glad I've apologized to my brother, and if that's the end of all contact with them, then so be it. It is what it is. My mom was contacting me every day in the months leading up to her deciding I should start seeing the family again. Now it's beginning to seem to me that she was doing so because she wanted me to return to them on my hands and knees, groveling and begging for forgiveness. Things certainly began to turn a bit sour when it became clear that I wasn't going to do that. Perhaps she sees it as the final betrayal and wants nothing more to do with me now. At the end of the day, I'm not ever going to pretend that they were for a second wrong for cutting contact with me. They did it to protect their 15-year-old son, and I completely understand it. Ultimately, though, I grew up, ended my addiction, and built a life for myself off the back of it without them involved in my life. It's very likely that they still had this image of the 19-year-old who turned completely white when he was told that they wanted nothing more to do with him. But that really isn't me anymore. And when they initially kicked me out, I felt like I needed them even though we didn't have the greatest of relationships. 5 years on from that, I certainly don't think I do anymore. I apologize to anyone who read the initial post and wanted me to go and see them in person again. But this is just how things have turned out. Once again, thank you to everyone for offering support and advice, and I hope that anyone reading this who has their own issues with family and estrangement is able to navigate them and build a relationship back if they so wish. Moving on to story 2. Update. I've, 24 male, fallen for my housemate, 28 male, and I don't know what to do. Original post. Okay, so before the lockdown, I genuinely thought that I was straight. I split up with my girlfriend of 3 years in January, and I've only ever been in male and female relationships. The thought of being with a man never crossed my mind, but it also didn't gross me out either. About 18 months ago, my housemate moved in. He's very openly gay and we've never really hung out all that much, but when we did, it was great. Our other housemate is the homeowner, but he's rarely home as he travels a lot for work and got stuck abroad when the lockdown began in March, so we are alone until June, but he left again this last week, leaving us in charge of the house. So, back in April, after spending more or less every day together as we were both furloughed, things got a bit comfortable one night and somehow we ended up watching porn together and we both jerked off. We didn't touch each other, but it was fun. A couple of nights later, we did the same thing, only this time we kissed as we jerked off. We fell into a pattern of this happening every few days, but each time it went a bit further, touching each other, jerking each other off, then eventually blowjobs. In May, it progressed to sex. He let me top because I was kind of scared to bottom, but a couple of weeks later, I was comfortable with him and I was starting to bottom anyway. It was out of this world. At first, we were only close when the porn was on, but by May, we cuddled each other from behind if one of us was cooking or we'd steal a kiss in passing. For all intents and purposes, it felt like we were in a relationship. When the homeowner returned in June, nothing changed except we made everything exclusive to when we were alone, and I continued sleeping in his room every night as I had for the past few weeks. Every morning we cuddled and kissed, and I was in heaven wondering why I hadn't noticed him sooner. When the homeowner left last week, I was full of optimism for the next 2 days. It was perfect, taking whatever it was between us outside of our rooms again and just enjoying it. Then on Saturday, just gone, his ex-boyfriend showed up. He said he had nowhere else to go and my housemate said he could stay, but he would have had to sleep on the sofa. That night, I slept alone for the first time since May after getting an apology and a goodnight kiss. That was the last time that he touched me. Thankfully, my work keeps me out of the house about 10 to 11 hours a day, but every night I come home to my housemate when he's not at work and the ex. If my housemate is home, the ex is glued to his side and I can't get a moment alone with him. Last night it was just me and the ex. I was making stir fry when he came bouncing in asking for some and I snapped. I don't even remember anything that I said, but it wasn't nice and I felt ridiculously guilty afterwards. This morning I was in the kitchen when they both entered together. I shared a brief glance with my housemate, but I looked away, catching the smug look on the ex's face. I half expected a scolding about respecting the ex, as they were pretty serious when they were together 7 to 8 years, and broke up before Christmas. But instead I got ignored, appetite ruined. I chucked my breakfast away and got in the car. I wasn't even thinking, but I ended up at this damn hill I used to hang out at as a teenager and just broke down. I haven't cried like this in years and I feel pathetic. It only just struck me how jealous I am, and as a secondary realization, I guess I'm bi. I'm so fucking heartbroken. I know we weren't in a relationship because we never had that conversation, but it felt like we were, and I was falling so hard for him. About a half an hour ago, I got a text from him saying, "Hold out until Sunday," and I haven't responded because I know he's not working today, which means his ex will be following him around like a lost puppy. I'm lost. I don't know if I mean anything to him or how to ask, and I'm terrified I was just a lockdown hookup. Now for the update. So Friday after my post here, I stayed with my older sister and her husband. When I arrived, my sister launched into protective mode and kept pushing to know what had driven me to break down, so I said dating stuff. She automatically assumed I meant a girl, and I didn't have the balls to correct her. I've only just realized I'm bi, and coming out is something I will have to build up to. As part of her relationship therapy, she confiscated my phone, gave me ridiculous amounts of ice cream, and we just chilled watching movies like we did when we were kids. Apparently, it's what she always does when one of her friends has a guy trouble, so I just went along with it, and it was the most relaxed I've felt all week despite feeling guilty for not telling my housemate I wasn't coming back that night. When my sister finally went to bed, I caved and stole my phone back, and everything hit me again, and I felt overwhelmingly sick and disappointed with myself. Bear in mind that my housemate isn't one for texting much or calling if he can avoid it. Even in our 3 months of bliss, he only ever texted me in response or about what food he wanted me to grab. But there were 6 texts and 8 missed calls this time. It was the first time he had ever chased me, and I hadn't responded to his original holdout until Sunday earlier, which was odd for me because I usually never ignore him. The first 5 were all questioning if I'm okay and checked if I'm coming home, but the final one hit me hard. Housemate, just tell me if you're safe, please. After sending him a text that confirmed I'm safe, he phoned me within a minute, which is honestly record-breaking for him, and my heart leaped straight into my throat. He was genuinely sounded cut up, and he launched into 1,001 questions. After being practically invisible for the past week, I didn't expect him to react that way. In some ways, I kind of thought he wouldn't notice me not being there, and I was waiting to be proved right. Anyway, once I could actually speak between his questions, I told him I wouldn't be coming home until his ex was gone, to which he confirmed ex was leaving on Sunday, whether or not he wanted to. There were a few moments of awkward silence, and then I asked, figuring it was better to know what I would come home to, or if my well-being I needed to look for a new place to live away from him. Me, was I just a fling, or did I actually mean something to you? Him. Me. Fine, forget I asked. Just let me know when he's gone. And him. You don't like guys, not like that. That's what you said. And yeah, I did say that after our first kiss back in April, but the topic never came up again with how things were going. It didn't feel like it needed to because I thought it was obvious after all the stuff that we've been doing together. I've honestly never facepalmed so hard before in my life. All this time he had been sleeping with me under the belief I was just with him because I didn't have a girlfriend around to get off with, and that I'd leave as soon as one showed up. I've literally been treating him like I would any of my previous partners, cooking for him, picking him up from work because he doesn't drive, and I didn't want him unnecessarily using public transport during a pandemic, hugging and kissing him outside of sex. And the only difference was that I haven't made it official in public because I didn't think we were a thing to be made public, and that I was kind of slow realizing how important he is to me. We chatted a bit and I apologized for making him worry, and he told me how it's been hell putting up with his ex today without me around for moral support. Turns out he finds ex more intimidating than I do, and when the ex showed up last Saturday, it was like his headspace went straight back to when he was trapped in that relationship. He admitted he didn't handle it well, but the reason he stopped all contact with me was so that we seemed like we used to before they broke up, because he didn't want ex discovering I was the one that he'd heard about on the grapevine that my housemate had moved on with, which means he's been telling people about me when I've not told anyone about him, all intending to stop ex directing his less than acceptable behavior towards me. At this point, it clicked in my head that their dynamic had never been a healthy one, centered around ex controlling my housemate, and the fear was crippling him. Now he was exposed to that situation again. The problem was that he had hid it so damn well that I never noticed. I wish he'd just put it in text. I offered to come home, but it was nearly 3 a.m., and my housemate was insistent I wait until morning as I was a good 15 miles away. He was in a car accident 2 years ago at night, which is why he no longer drives. Anyway, somehow we arrived at a conversation about how we initially hooked up. I admitted that after watching porn with him, I was just generally curious about what it would be like to be with a guy, but I didn't expect to like it, and I wasn't bothered back then if I'd never found out. I also found it a turn-on that he's taller than me, which I've always kind of had a thing for, but I've always been the taller one. Then he admitted that he'd always found me attractive, but accepted it as impossible, which was why he used to limit how often we'd hung out, because while we always got along, crushing on his straight friend was killing him. But when we watched porn together in April, he was determined not to waste his only chance and did anything sexually to keep me beside him for as long as possible, but it was always in his mind that I wouldn't date him at the end of it. I replied, well, it's a good thing it turns out that I'm bi then, huh? And then we both turned into two idiots, realizing what this meant for us both. Some tears were spilled. Then yesterday morning I got home at 8 a.m. after only about an hour or so of sleep, and took too much delight in relocating ex's belongings to the driveway and telling him where to go. Normally, I never had that level of confidence, but I finally realized my housemate needed someone to be the braver one when it came to his ex. The guy keyed the side of my car before leaving, but the joke's on him as it's way overdue for scrapping, and it barely passed its last MOT, so now I've got another reason to go car searching. Also tonight will be the first time I pick my boyfriend up, and I baked him an Oreo cake while he was at work as I know it's his favorite. So he's got a surprise waiting for him when he gets home. I never want him to feel around me what he did with his ex. And now I say goodbye and head out to pick him up. Thanks, Reddit. Edit. I don't know where to start. This really wasn't the response I expected to us both being idiots around each other. Thank you so much, everyone. There's way too many comments for me to reply to individually, but I've read every single one. I thank you all for your encouraging and supportive messages. I'm so glad my ridiculous life has cheered so many of you up. It's a great feeling knowing that more than just me and my boyfriend benefited from this weekend. As for people who say that this reads like a story, I'm not surprised as I work in theater and writing performing is what I'm professionally used to. Although you have given me the idea to adapt this experience into a piece for the future, so thanks, I guess. Cue mortified boyfriend at the first showing. I haven't really got any closing words, but I just want to tell everyone that life can be amazing sometimes and hit you right in the face. I have so much optimism for the future, but I'm also scared. I don't want to keep him a secret, but we've agreed when I come out it should be in person, so we're going to see how we go, and the next time my family has a get-together after all the restrictions ease, further, I'm going to bring him with me and introduce him. Thanks, everyone. That's all for today. If you're enjoying this story, please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you.